all over the place. Hello. Okay. Yes. Lesson 4. So, yeah, again, the numbering system on these are weird. So we're technically on lesson 5, but the questions for that are on lesson 4. So we technically need both, I guess. So we're going through the questions on the back of the lesson 4 packet because they're labeled lesson 4, even though they apply to lesson 5, which is weird. So the lesson 5 packet has the author's write-up about this section, which we probably won't get to, but if you want to read it on your own, that's cool. And then the lesson 5 questions will apply to next week's study. So if you could get the lesson 5 packet, that would be good, but the lesson 4 packet will have the actual discussion points for today. So we are on Ruth chapter 3. We are past the halfway point of the book because it's only 4 chapters long. Ruth and Naomi have returned to Israel. Ruth started gleaning. She winds up in Boaz's field. Boaz takes special notice of her. And he's just heaping all of the favoritism upon her. He's given her privileged position in the gleaning order. He invited her to actually eat with him. He served her with his own hands. He gave her enough food that she was able to eat and take a doggy bag home, and she was able to glean a very large amount of grain. So she comes home, gives the grain plus her doggy bag to Naomi, and Naomi's just like, where did you go that you got this much? You should keep going to that field. And Ruth reveals that it was Boaz, and Naomi's like, oh, he's one of our relatives, one of our redeemers. So the cogs start to turn in Naomi's head. And so today we are going to get to Naomi's plan. So our guide is taking us for Ruth 3, verses 1 through 18, which I believe is the entire chapter. So yeah, we'll read through the chapter and go through the discussion questions, and hopefully we stay within the hour for Bible study. All right, here we go. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. And she replied, all that you say I will do. So she went down to the threshing floor, and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And then, excuse me. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. And he said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning. So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, bring the garment you are wearing and hold it out. So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, "How did you fare, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "These 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said, 'You must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law.'" She replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today." All right, so personal application questions on the back of the lesson 4 packet then. Number 1. Ruth had been caring for Naomi for some days, and Naomi now wanted to return the kindness shown to her. What did Naomi want to do to help Ruth? Right. So it's should I not seek rest for you that it may be well with you? Naomi wants Ruth to be settled and have rest, have a future. Rest is the idea of security. I mean, right. So if we go back to where is it? Chapter 1. Um, 1 verse 9, when Naomi is first trying to send Ruth and Orpah away, she says, "The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband." So the idea of rest is this idea of security and settlement. And so in chapter 3, when she's now saying, "Should I not seek rest for you?" she's basically saying, I should be a matchmaker here and get you a husband. Because, like I said, the wheels are turning in her head. She recognizes um, Boaz definitely favors Ruth with all of the special privileges he's given to her in the field and the gleaning. Um, to Naomi, Naomi recognizes that Boaz is interested in Ruth, and she's like, "Oh, this could all work out." Okay, so she comes up with this plot. Plot sounds nefarious. Plan. She comes up with this plan for how to make this all work, to get Ruth and Boaz to admit feelings for each other and see what happens. And so Naomi is going to do what she can to see that Ruth becomes established now in Israel, because if she gets married to an Israelite, she will then become an Israelite. She won't be a sojourner anymore. They'll have access to their family farming plot because Boaz will redeem it. He'll purchase it back for them. And she'll be, not that she'll just get to sit on the couch and watch soap operas all day, but she'll have that security, that establishment, so she won't be a sojourner, which is almost like being a homeless person because you don't really own land or have your own means. That's why you have to do the gleaning to provide for yourself. And so it's definitely going to be a step up for her in a way to provide rest. So Naomi wants to get Ruth and Boaz together so that all of these, it benefits Naomi too, but it's really for the sake of Ruth, who is, she left her family, she left her native land to be here, and Naomi is trying to make the best of that situation as possible for Ruth. Is that all? Am I still making sense? Okay. Or you haven't had a Bible study with me yet, have you? You haven't had a Bible study with me yet, have you? Okay. Yeah, I branch off in various directions, so okay. Yeah, some people get thrown off by it, so I'm just warning you now. All right. Question 2 then. Nice person. This is the personal sharing time that we love to do so much. Have you ever tried to be a matchmaker? If so, how did your efforts work out? And did you consult the heavenly matchmaker in the process? Anyone here tried to play matchmaker, or do we just need to skip this question entirely? Yeah. Yeah. All right, moving on then. Question 3. Naomi was a loving mother in law to Ruth. It was Naomi's desire to see Ruth have a full and complete life. She apparently had been planning an encounter meant to help Ruth and herself. Describe the detailed plan that Naomi now gives to Ruth. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yes. The specific plan, though, is like I think the question is asking for the specifics of how we're going to accomplish that, which we have in verses 3 through 4. Um, so first she says, "Wash yourself and anoint yourself and put on your cloak." So there's a couple of background things that are happening here. Based on the commentaries I was reading, the implication is that Ruth has been still in her mourning clothes for her husband, um, which socially kind of expresses, "Hey, everyone, I'm off the market because I'm still in mourning." And so this idea of washing and anointing herself has the implication of not wearing her mourning clothes, but maybe dressing fancy, but at least in more normal attire, so which is a way of saying, "I'm not in mourning anymore. I'm now eligible for remarriage should anyone be interested." But then she has her cover herself with a cloak so that in the when she first appears in at Boaz's household, anyone who sees her, they just see the cloak around her. The cloak may have been part of the mourning clothes as well. So when she first shows up, everyone still thinks she's in mourning. It's not until uh, nightfall when she does the next step of the plan that the cloak will come off and she'll be kind of declaring herself available, so to speak. And then the next step of the plan is to note where Boaz goes to lie down, and then he just kind of hides somewhere out of sight. And then when everyone's asleep, she goes and she approaches where Boaz is sleeping, uncovers his feet, and lays down there, which I'm going to stop talking there, or else I'm going to answer question 9 ahead of time. But she lays at his feet, and when he wakes up, she's supposed to say, um, da, da, da. But Naomi says, "He will tell you what to do." So she's kind of entrusting herself to whatever Boaz commands her, which I think we talk about in 9 through 11. So I'm not going to talk more about that there. But she's setting up this way. It's basically the most socially acceptable way, I guess, for a woman in this time and place to go up to a man and be like, "Hey, I'm interested in you. Do you want to marry me?" Because women didn't do the proposing; the men have to do the proposing, and so this is like, guys, we're really bad at subtlety and picking up hints. So Naomi is telling Ruth how to be like, give the most blatant hints possible to give Boaz the opening to do his part and actually take the initiative and ask her. Is that all making sense? Um, all right, yeah. Like I said, there's more details, but if I talk about that now, I'm answering ahead. So we'll wait until question 9. Question 4, probably we're just going to skip this one because I don't think any of us really have thoughts on how we would plan a similar kind of encounter in today's society meant to accomplish the same results. Because we just agreed that matchmaking doesn't work in the first place. So, uh, yeah. 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 Yeah, mourning is not really a thing in American society anymore. It used to be. I think it was like the 20s was when that stopped. But it used to be you go to the department store and there'd just be a mourning clothes section where you would go if someone close to you died, and you would just be wearing black for the next year or whatever, however long your mourning period lasted. And part of that was personal decision, part of that was societal. I don't know. I'm not an early American history person, so I don't know exactly what the social conventions were for that. But there was kind of a socially mandated period of mourning where you were just expected to wear mourning clothes for that time. I believe the British royal family is still required anytime they travel to have a set of mourning clothes in their luggage, just in case some other member of the British royal family dies while they're abroad, and then they're not. It's like if Queen Elizabeth dies, they don't get pictures of Harry wearing a red suit because that's all he had. Although I don't know if Harry counts anymore. William is not caught the next day wearing a red suit because he was vacationing down in South Africa, and that's all he had in his luggage. He has to have a black suit with him at all times, so that if he finds out that his mom is dead or his grandma's dead, he just right away he's in the black suit, so everyone can see that he's mourning and he's in recognition of the mourning. This was a really weird tangent. How did I get down here? All right. Question 5 requires that we answer question 4. And question 6 is also assuming we answered question 4. But yeah, so that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. So for anyone watching online who's just been watching me stand in silence for the last 2 minutes, Walt has been pointing out that not that we're doing the matchmaking thing because that's really hard to do, but general life advice for anyone looking for a spouse. He advises them go to church and look for someone there. His phrase from he said father mother from his mom is if you meet a girl at the bar, chances are when you're out of the house she'll be back at the bar again. Not that that applies in every situation, but there's kind of that implication. Think about where you're actually looking and the kind of person you're hoping to find. We have plenty of warnings from Paul about not being unequally yoked. As I've been saying through this study, our culture really doesn't understand what love is or what marriage is. We've watered marriage down to just, I like hanging out with this person, so let's make a vow to hang out with each other for the next 4 years or so, and then if we get bored, we'll divorce each other and we'll find someone else we like to hang out with. You need something more than just kind of shared personal hobbies. You need actual like shared core values and morals and ethics and worldview. And so if you're a Christian and you're not actively looking for another Christian to marry, you're already setting yourself up for failure. Marie had this. I want to point out the difference between Ruth's time and our time. Okay. Her time was reliant on the family and other members, like a maid, to take care of her. Yeah. Nowadays, we are more self-sufficient with the help of the Lord, that we have no need for another person to fit in our lives unless we really want them. Mm-hmm. And I don't see a problem with now. You can have all the friends, male, female, that you want, and not have to rely on sex or anything else to sustain life, because you can always go to the Lord and He will provide for you if you really trust Him. Mm-hmm. I don't see a correlation here from the past. Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. So Maria is pointing out it's again going to this thing starting from question 4, trying to plan encounters similar to what Naomi does for Ruth. It's really hard to even make that comparison just because of how much of the cultural shift there is. Ruth's day it's an Eastern society. They're very much they're much more reliant on family. The family has a much greater input in your life than our rugged individualistic American culture, where we're all our own person. Marriages often were arranged, usually by your father, although Ruth's father isn't there. But so Naomi is kind of stepping in the fatherly role and doing what she can to make a marriage arrangement to the extent that a woman could do it in this culture. Um, and so it's hard to make comparisons between now and then, because I don't know, when was the last time you heard of an American family doing an arranged marriage? Well, I did an arranged marriage for my daughter, but we're still negotiating on that. But I have picked her husband out already. But generally, that's not a thing. We expect people to go off and find someone on their own, and like, yeah, you have them meet the parents eventually and maybe get their approval, but it's not the parents pick someone and it's like, okay, you're going to marry my daughter, now treat her well. So that cultural distinction makes it really hard to make comparisons as well. Um, mm-hmm.
Tell me if I'm wrong. Ruth is trusting Naomi. She does not know the culture. She doesn't know what's going to happen. Is she going to go down and look very
Presentable?
No, like she's just laying herself out there?
Yeah.
Is he going to take advantage of her? And then the next day it's just going to be another day? And Naomi knows the culture. Mm-hmm. She knows where the lines are drawn. Mm-hmm. And she sends her out there with those lines, and he responds with respect.
Yeah.
To her, even her to him. It must be something to do with the feet. Like the washing of the feet is servants would wash another's feet. Mm-hmm. So there must be something with the feet there.
Yeah, we'll get to the feet in question 9.
Okay.
but yeah, so there's there is a lot of trust that's happening with this entire plan, because as question 6 tells us, again, it's assuming we made a plan in question 4, which we didn't, but if we did, would you trust your plan enough to say he will tell you what to do and know that it would not become just another sexual encounter? So Ruth, I'm sure, is somewhat familiar with the culture. Just, she had been married to an Israelite back in Moab, and it's entirely possible there were certain similarities between the Israelites and the Moabites. They are cultural cousins. There's differences, but it's kind of like, we can maybe say, don't quote me on this because I'm not entirely sure, but it could be something like America and Canada, where, yeah, there's different cultural expectations, but there's enough similarities you could kind of figure out what's going on there, even if someone's not guiding you. But still, Naomi's plan to Ruth is approach this man in the middle of the night and do whatever he tells you to do, which could go vastly wrong. We'll talk about that again in question 9. So Naomi is trusting Boaz that he's not going to take advantage of this situation that she's setting up. And Ruth is trusting that Naomi knows Boaz well enough that he won't be taking advantage of the situation. Because, if you send we don't have a description of how Ruth looks, but if you read between the lines, it seems she's a rather attractive woman. You send an attractive, young, slightly desperate woman to a man in the middle of the night and says, "Do whatever you want with me." How much trust do you have that would end well? So there's a lot of trust involved in all of this. Like I said, both Naomi trusting that Boaz will be an honorable man, and then Ruth trusting Naomi's assessment of everything and going along with it, while still expecting to come out of this with her honor intact. Is that making sense? Get to your point that you're making.
In the Middle East in general, not only Israel, they follow the honor system. Mm-hmm. Boaz seems to be an known man with a certain amount of wealth, mm-hmm. that he has as influence. He didn't get there by just, in the US, somebody's wealthy, somebody's wealthy. Mm-hmm. It's just a number on a check. But there, your influence is because of your reputation. And it's very easy to tarnish that or to say how to build it. Mm-hmm. So to trust people with something like this, when you say somebody is an honorable man or someone is an honorable woman, they're known whether somebody's watching or not, mm-hmm. get into a slot. Yeah. They're not fully not. That's where all the trust comes from. They've been tested. And again, you have somebody who has a reputation that's not tarnished, that takes a lot of work.
Yeah. So again, this is another cultural hurdle we have to get over. In the Middle East, it is much more of an honor culture than what we're used to in America, and we're told that Boaz is a honorable man or a worthy man. I'm trying to find the exact verse, but it's hard to scan while I'm talking. But Boaz has a reputation for being a good person, essentially. Okay, 2:1. Yeah, Naomi had a relative of her husband, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. So we're told already Boaz is worthy. He has this reputation as a righteous man. And so Naomi is trusting in that as well. And when you're in a very honor-based society, if a person, it's a lot harder to be double-faced when every aspect of your life gets revolved around the honor system than it is in America. It's harder to be a hypocrite in that kind of society. And so to be recognized as an honorable man, you really have to have this good reputation. And so that kind of precedes her. That's probably part of why Naomi is trusting that this plan is going to go accordingly, that the fact that Boaz is so well known for his conduct gives an indication that he is a really good man. Still, temptation is a thing, and how many good men have fallen to this particular temptation, like David and Solomon. So even though Boaz does have this really good reputation, and he kind of has to be a relatively decent person in order to have that reputation, I think there still is a pretty big amount of trust that he really is that way, and he's not going to take advantage of this situation that Ruth is being put in. Is that fair to say? Okay. All right. We ready to move on to question 7 then? All right. Try to, and I think we did this already, but try to explain why Ruth willingly went along with Naomi's plan. What had Naomi's suggestions brought to her life so far? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so Ruth has been trusting Naomi a lot. Because, again, the whole start of the book, Ruth is leaving her homeland, leaving her family to stick with Naomi and become a sojourner in Israel as a Moabite woman, widow, sojourner. She's pretty low on the totem pole in Israel, but she still trusts in Naomi and Naomi's God that they'll see them through, and so she's trusted Naomi this far. Hasn't exactly been a land of milk and honey for them. They're still sojourners reliant on gleaning. But for a gleaner, she's making out pretty well so far, going with in Naomi's, recognizing that Boaz is part of Naomi's family. I don't think Ruth is completely naive either. I think that she can recognize Boaz has an interest in her as well, but maybe she doesn't know the culture well enough to know how to approach that. I think she knows that she's pretty favored by Boaz, and so she can trust that Naomi's plan will work too, which I think is part of going along with it. Like I said, Boaz has been very kind to her in chapter 2 already. And again, you also have this. She's somewhat familiar with the Israelite culture, but she's still a foreigner. Naomi is the Israelite here, so of course she's going to trust her input on how to go about this as well. That all the talking points. Okay. Question 8 then. When and where did Boaz lie down to spend the night? He's at the bottom of the heap of grain, I believe. Yeah, at the end of the heap of grain.
So when you read that, did they do that to protect their grain so someone can come tonight and start shoveling it up and haul it off?
Yeah. So they're doing the harvest, and then after you harvest the grain, you have to thresh it. So they're in the threshing room, on the threshing floor, whatever you call it. And so they spend their day threshing the grain, and then they sleep there, partly because threshing is exhausting work, and it's easier to just fall asleep there than have to go back home and get cleaned up and then come back in the morning to do it again. But then partly it is to guard the grain, because if you're an unscrupulous person, the threshing room is just this, it's basically a giant silo full of prepared grain. And if you're hungry and you don't care about thievery, that's a really easy way to get food. You just sneak in there with a bucket and shoomp, all right, I've got food for the week. And so during the threshing time, they would just sleep on the threshing floor, and that way the grain, someone could still sneak in, obviously, because that's what Ruth does. But it makes it a lot harder to sneak in and steal a significant amount of grain, because now you've got bodies all over the floor, and if you step on one and wake them up, you're going to be in trouble. So they spend their day harvesting and threshing the grain. They eat on the site, and then they all just kind of camp out on the threshing floor. I'll save that for the next question then. So yeah, Boaz is there, but also his workers are in the room too, which can maybe make things a little bit awkward. But yeah, they're camping out there, partially just practical. It's convenient. It's if you sleep on the job site, you can get started early in the morning and not lose light. But yeah, also it's to guard the grain against thieves. Question 9 then, explain how Ruth approached Boaz and tell what she did. What was her action meant to accomplish? And how long did Ruth have to wait before Boaz realized she was lying at his feet? Yes. Any thoughts on why? Yes. Cold air wakes him up. Okay, so some background stuff. They're in Israel, but like I've said before, this is in the time of the judges, and Israel is not really, doesn't have a reputation for being as Israel is supposed to be. You read through the book of Judges, Israel keeps copying the nations around them. And in the other Canaanite nations, the threshing floor kind of has a reputation for prostitutes, because you have all of these men who've been working hard all day, and now they're all sleeping in one convenient location, and so the prostitutes know, hey, I can just go to this place, and there's a bunch of men who've been working all day and want some kind of release, and there's plenty to pick from, so I'll just go there and make myself available, and whoever wants to hire me hires me. So in the region of Canaan, there's kind of this sort of sexually charged reputation around the threshing floor because of that. And so part of this issue is that, if Ruth walks in and she just like jostles Boaz awake, he might think that this is a prostitute who's come to the threshing floor and she's like trying to solicit men. And so he may wake up and he's like, get out of here, whore. And then that wakes everyone else up. And whether that's Ruth's intention or not, now her reputation is ruined. So she needs a gentle way to wake him up, which is accomplished by uncovering his feet. If your feet get cold at night and you want to have one foot outside the blanket, but if the second foot gets outside the blanket, it gets too cold and that wakes you up. And so this was a gentle way to make him be naturally awoken, so he's not jerked awake, but it kind of aligns with the circadian rhythms, and he'll wake up with more of his senses, and then he'll be like, wait, something's weird. Oh, there's a lady. Oh, hi, Ruth. What's going on? Rather than jostling him awake and being like, what's going on? Ah, sound the alarm. So it's a practical way to gently get him to wake up on his own time without raising the alarm, and then they can talk quietly because it's not going to make any noise. It's not going to wake anyone else up, because it does take a while. I mean, we don't know exactly when he goes to bed after dinner, so probably a little bit after sunset, but it's not until midnight that he actually wakes up. So it did take a while. It was a very gentle and gradual waking up. You have to wait for it to actually cool down enough for this to have an effect. That's the practical application for all of this. Now, where stuff gets weird if you start to read commentaries and such on Ruth, we have this issue that there's already kind of this reputation about the threshing floor in the region of Canaan. And we also have this issue that in the cultures of the ancient Middle East, including Hebrew, the word feet is often a euphemism for genitalia. So if you read a commentary on Isaiah 6, when he has the vision of heaven, and there's the six-winged seraphim, and there are two wings that cover their faces and two wings that cover their feet, you're going to find a commentary like, oh, maybe they're actually covering their genitals, and this is just talking about how modest they are. Because that's kind of a thing. And so you have, in our wonderful modern liberal theological perspectives, you have people who read Ruth and say, oh, when she uncovers Boaz's feet, she's actually making him naked, and they actually do have premarital sex on the threshing room floor. I was just reading a post about this like the other day, because it was kind of the pushback against the purity culture of the 90s when you got all the really liberal Christians who are like, oh no, premarital sex is the best thing. The Bible wants us to have it. They'll look to Ruth and be like, hey, see, when she uncovers Boaz's feet, she's actually like banging him in his sleep. And so and from this we get David and we get Jesus. So premarital sex is totally condoned by Ruth. So that interpretation is out there. That's not what's happening in Ruth. It doesn't say that at all. Boaz does everything he can to protect her reputation because he recognizes that would be wrong. And I forgot the actual argument, but I do have a commentary on Ruth where the author explains it's the phrasing of the Hebrew is very specific to show that they don't actually have sex, but it is close enough that you do have this kind of tension in the narrative, because as people are reading the story of Ruth, they know the reputation of the threshing floor. They know that feet is often a euphemism, and it is this what's going to happen when she uncovers his feet and she basically says, do whatever you want with me. This is kind of the testing point of Boaz to see if he's going to be an honorable man to her or not. But the way the Hebrew is actually phrased, the nuance there lets us know it actually is his real feet, not the euphemistic feet that are uncovered. And then when it says, so she lay at his feet until the morning in verse 14, the nuance of the grammar there makes it clear she actually is laying at his feet. They're not having premarital sex like liberal theology will insist in order to justify the other ways that they go down into the rabbit hole of liberal theology.
One of the first things that he said is not the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord be with you.
Right.
He does the same thing. Ask her, who are you? And she responds,
Yeah, he says, may you be blessed by the Lord.
Right.
Yeah.
He then prays again
Mm-hmm.
To me, that just takes all the sex out of it.
Yeah.
Together, that is showing his reputation and his dedication to the Lord.
If we look at the text, we see, like, again, everything about Boaz says that he is a worthy man, an honorable man. He greets his men, saying, "The Lord be with you." When he sees Ruth, he says, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter." Um, all we have to know about Boaz says that he is a righteous and honorable man. And yeah, the fact that people look at this and they just make this quick jump to, oh, feet is euphemism for genitals, so they have premarital sex, kind of shows you where liberal Christianity goes in their interpretations of Scripture. They're very much into the, which again, when you throw out the Bible as being the inerrant Word of God and you turn it into just, oh, these are ancient philosophies about God and what they thought, but it's not divinely inspired, so we can just pick and choose what we like and we can throw out the parts that we don't like. You get readings like this where you can make this quick correlation. Oh, feet means genitals, they have premarital sex, and then you can just ignore the rest of the text because that doesn't fit the narrative you want. Because when things don't fit the narrative you want, you can just say, oh no, that's just a thought, that's not God actually talking. And so you end up with a theology of your own making. It's called eisegesis, reading into the text what you want to find, rather than exegesis, which is drawing your beliefs out of the text rather than inserting your own into the text. So yeah, if you actually reading Ruth and doing the study and looking at the context and how everyone reacts, it really doesn't work to make the argument that they had premarital sex, but that interpretation is out there. So if you ever hear someone talking about that, now hopefully you have some pushback against it. And yeah, if you need the actual excerpt from the commentary where he explains the Hebrew, I can email that to you. Just let me know. But my Hebrew is really rusty, so I don't want to explain Hebrew grammar up here if I can help it. So yeah, the uncovering the feet thing, the practical purpose is just to gently awaken him to make sure he doesn't sound the alarm and wake up anyone else or come at this whole thing with suspicion. But narratively, it does create this, what's going to happen here, tension. Are they going to remain honorable and chaste, or is this going to turn into a trashy romance novel? Let's find out. Yeah, I think that's all the points I had on 9. Anything I may have missed or that we need to expand upon? Okay, 10. How did Boaz greet Ruth? Y'all already brought that up. He starts out being, I would say, curious. The man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet! Exclamation point! And he said, "Who are you?" I think he's startled. Like, it's not the most, sometimes you kick the blankets off your feet and that wakes you up. So that's not the most startling thing. But then he realizes there's someone down there. That would be a little bit weird. I mean, I would assume it's a cat if it's my house, but there's someone laying at his feet. That's weird. He's like, "Who are you? What's going on?" And then she replies, "I'm Ruth, your servant." So once he knows who she is, he's much more gracious. And like we say, he says, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter." And I'm going to stop there before I answer question 11 ahead of its time. But yeah, he's.
She also tells him right there that I am your servant and you are a redeemer.
Right.
So she tells him kind of straight up. And that works. Kind of where she's going with this.
Mm-hmm.
She's not trying to trick him.
Yeah.
You are a redeemer, and that means that through the lineage of Ruth's husband, who was, in the family clan, he was a redeemer.
Mm-hmm. So Walt has brought us into question 11 now. How did Ruth respond? What title did she give to Boaz? So when he says, "Who are you?" and his very cautious, "What's going on here?" She says, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." So Ruth introduces herself. She makes her intentions known. She wants him to spread his wings over her. She names herself as his servant. She's submitting to him, kind of going along with Naomi's plan of he will tell you what to do. She's submitting herself to Boaz and whatever he will tell her to do. But then she points out, you are a redeemer. She's giving him the title of redeemer. And then we get our nice Sunday school question, to whom do you give this title in your life? And hopefully we all know the answer is Jesus. If you don't know that answer, you need to talk to me later. And we have a cross-reference to Colossians 1. He has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. So again, Ruth is a narrative on its own. It's a narrative that shows us chaste respectability between a man and a woman, even though they're interested in each other and they have this situation where they could break the sixth commandment. They refrain because they recognize that's not the righteous thing to do. But it's also typological. So in Boaz, we see a type of Christ, which again, in typology, you have a type in the Old Testament, and then that Jesus then becomes the antitype of in the New Testament, recognizing that the anti-prefix doesn't necessarily mean the opposite of, it can also mean in the place of. And so you have types happening in the Old Testament that foreshadow what Jesus does in the New Testament, where he replaces it, he fulfills it in an even newer and better way. And so Boaz is going to be a type of Christ in how he redeems Ruth and her family, in the same way that Jesus, as the antitype, redeems the whole world through his death. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But
When he said, when she told him to spread your wing on your servant, according to the doctrine, that means she asked for his protection. That means he's
right.
Middle East, they take that really seriously. There's a story of, I don't know if anybody watched The Lone Survivor.
Yes.
Just because he asked in the end for that one guy's protection, he was willing to die for him, though he doesn't know it. He just gave me my protection. I'm going to do everything I can. And that's part of the honor system. And then somebody knocks on somebody's door and say, I need your protection. It doesn't matter. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of this Ruth's phrasing when she says spread your wings over your servant, she's asking him to be her advocate, to be her protector. She's kind of invoking the rights of hospitality, which again we don't really recognize super well in America, but it's a really big deal in the Middle East. The most contemporary analogy I can think of is, if anyone here watched Game of Thrones, I know we all tried to forget Game of Thrones after season 8 because they handled it so poorly, but there's a very big plot point in hospitality rights in season 4, I think. I'm sorry, I'm confusing the books and the show because they make a bigger deal about it in the books. But it's this understanding that when someone asks you for sanctuary, you're supposed to give them all the protection you can. To betray that is a huge blow to your honor. And as we've been saying, in the Middle East, you have this very big honor culture. And so she's asking him to be her protector, invoking the rights of hospitality. She's, Hunchback of Notre Dame, she's crying out sanctuary in the church. And so then the church has to do whatever they can to protect them, sort of idea. And this idea of spreading wings over somebody to protect them, this is a somewhat common motif for God in relation to Israel, especially if you read through the Psalms. Jesus quotes it when he is riding into Jerusalem, or when he's approaching Jerusalem for Palm Sunday, and he weeps over it. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills prophets, I would have loved to gather you as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. I'm paraphrasing, but you have that protection motif, just as a mother protects their own child. You don't upset the mother bear. That's the kind of protection that Ruth is invoking from Boaz and asking him to cover her under, or to spread his wings over her. Is that fair? Okay. All right, any other thoughts on 11 then? Running a little short on time, but that's never stopped me before. Question 12 then. What does Boaz's response tell us about him, and for what does Boaz commend Ruth? Right. Well, he already knows the closer one, but we'll get to that. Yeah, so we see that Boaz is honorable, he's humble, he's grateful, because he says, verse 10, you have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. Which answers the second part of question 10. So Boaz is...
He's commending her for, I thought, for, she could have gone and married younger men her age.
Yeah.
Here's Boaz, probably more like Naomi's age.
Yeah.
But Ruth, I think he's commending her for staying loyal to Naomi, and instead of going looking for a younger husband, looks to him to be the redeemer, to get the property back, to continue to take care of Naomi.
Right.
That loyalty was more important to her than finding a younger husband.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, you're right. So yeah, we see Boaz as honorable because, Ruth names herself as his servant, and she asks for his protection. And if he were a less savory character, he could have said, "Oh, I'll give you your protection for a cost." He could have taken advantage of this situation, as we've been saying for the first half of this study, but he doesn't. So again, we're seeing that Boaz is honorable. He's righteous before the Lord to the extent that anyone can be. He recognizes the importance of chastity and not taking advantage of Ruth. We see that he's humble. He's not, oh, yes, of course I deserve this wonderful woman to come and throw herself at my feet. He's like, you didn't have to come to me. You could. And again, this is where we can kind of read between the lines and recognize that Ruth is probably a rather attractive lady. He's like, you could have gone after other men, whether poor or rich. Kind of this implication, like, you're pretty fine, lady. You could have any guy you want. I can't believe you're coming to me. This is wow. So he's not full of himself. He's humbled. He recognizes Ruth has other options, but still she's coming to him, which leads us to what part of what he commends her for. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. So just as Boaz has this reputation for being a worthy person, Ruth also has a reputation for being a worthy woman. We see this in chapter 2 when Boaz sees her in the field and he asks who she is. And the servant just says, she's the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. There's already a reputation around her, small town, people talk. So Boaz knows that Ruth did leave her homeland and her family in order to stay with Naomi and try to make sure that she's taken care of. He did see her working hard in the field even after she got all this privileged position, but she still did as much work as she could to make sure that Naomi was taken care of. And so from what he's seen and from what he's heard, he already knows Ruth is a good woman, a worthy woman. She could have gone after other guys to her own benefit, but she's coming to Boaz. Boaz is probably older, closer to Elimelech's age, which was Ruth's father-in-law, because that's what's better for Naomi. Because if Ruth could find some other guy and she could be fine for the rest of her life, and then Naomi would just be stuck as a widow. But if Ruth goes with Boaz and he redeems them, Naomi gets access to her family land back. She's still a widow, but she's not a widow without land. She has access to her husband's land, and they'll get, because of the Levantine marriage thing, if Boaz marries Ruth as a redeemer, their firstborn son would count as the lineage of Elimelech rather than Boaz. And so then Ruth's firstborn son would then be basically as a son to Naomi, then to watch over her and take care of her. So Ruth is making a sacrifice on her part too for the sake of Naomi, and Boaz recognizes this and he's like, you're such a good woman that you're being this kind and caring to Naomi even when you could personally benefit more with other options that are out there. And so he's commending her for her kindness, her love for Naomi, her caring for Naomi, and just, she's being a righteous woman, and he's commending her for that. All right, we are at time, and question 13 kind of takes us in as, it's not a continuation, so I will call it here. So next week we'll start on question 13, and who knows how long we'll get on there. So if you want to make sure you have a question 5, or a lesson 5 packet, that has the authors of the studies notes on this section if you want to review those. But then the lesson 5 questions at the back are what we'll go on to once we finish lesson 4. So I don't know, we might spend the whole hour on just 13 through 21 next week. That's kind of what happened with the last one. But if we do finish the lesson 4 questions, we'll move on to the lesson 5 questions. And again, technically these are supposed to be homework that you do on your own time, but we go through the questions here anyway. So if your pages are blank and you're filling it in as I'm talking, I don't know. I'm not grading you. So that's the plan. We'll finish up lesson 4 questions next week. If you want to grab the lesson 5 packet and look ahead and work ahead and be a teacher's pet, you can. But I'm not grading you if you don't do it. I can't really do anything about it. So I will pray us out, and then we can get ready for the service. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this narrative of Ruth that you have given us, that we have examples of godly people living out godly lives, that we may seek to emulate their attitudes. We thank you for the typology you have presented to us in Boaz, so that we can have a more nuanced understanding of what Christ accomplished for us on the cross. And we thank you for this opportunity to gather for the divine service where we receive the forgiveness won for us on the cross. And we remain ever thankful that you do pour out your mercy upon us new each morning. And we ask that you would bless us as we prepare to worship you in response to the gifts that you have given us and continue to give us. Please keep us safely in your hands until we can gather once again in your name, in which we pray. Amen.